is the first chapter of Ezekiel in the Bible, where the stones, העצמות היבשות זה בפרק 1, א'? לא, זה בפרק ז', in chapter 7 or 8. In any case, there is a very famous prophecy of Ezekiel. He walks and he sees a valley, full of bones, like skeletons, dry bones.
It's like that song, them bones and bones. I mean, that's where that's from. Them dry bones and yeah.
Dry bones. Okay. Now, of course, these bones are a metaphor for the exilic Israelites. They are in exile. They're in Babylonia, and their bones is the collective. Their collective living. They are like dead. They don't believe. It's like they're like corpse. And it's interesting because in this prophecy, the bones say, "Hine avda tikvatenu." Our hope is lost. Until what? God will bring the Mashiach, the Messiah, and will infuse a new spirit into the bones, and the bones will rise, and then we will bring you back to the land of Israel and redemption and So, here, Naftali Herz Imber, the writer of Hatikva, did something that all the Orthodox rabbis, they wanted to kill him for that. Because he took the verse, Od lo avda tikvatenu, and he said, our hope is lost. He said, no, our hope is not lost. But our hope is not lost not because we're waiting for a Messiah to come and redeem us. The hope is not lost. Why? If what? Exactly.
What did you say? If a Jewish soul still yearns, if there's a yearning, then the hope isn't lost.
The Messiah is not an outward figure that we're waiting for him or her to come. It lies in you. It brings in, it's an internal. Thank you. Of Messianism into the present and into people's minds. He said, no, forget the Mashiach. Mashiach is not interesting. What is interesting are Jews. As long as Jews carry with themselves the notion that they're Jewish and aspire to that old homeland, to revive this, the days of glory, then we have Lashana Haba. Then we have a future. Some of the Orthodox rabbis couldn't bear it because that was exactly an anti-traditional move for them. We should have waited for the Messiah to come. And Imber, the writer of Hatikva, said, no. You're absolutely mistaken. The Messiah is not the issue. The issue are Jews with their living aspirations. As long as we have them looking on the past and hoping for a future, then we can do something. Yes?
Is that why the Chabadniks aren't really into Israel so much? Because they only...
No, it's not that they are into Eretz Israel, to the land of Israel, but they're not into Medinat Israel, into the state of Israel, which is a secular endeavor. So they will tell you, some of the Orthodox tell you, of course we're Zionists. You're telling me? I mean, they would say, I'm a Zionist, of course. I'm praying for the Jerusalem 3 times a day, and of course But it's a different orientation, because it's an orientation towards Israel as a religious place with holiness. And Zionism, in its core, even some of not the contemporary ones, but even some of the Orthodox religious Zionists, they didn't see Zionism as a messianic move. They saw it as people taking hold of their future and starting to do something with it. Let me tell you something very, very interesting. That when I was taught, the history of that, it was striking for me. The Uganda debate that Herzl came and said, they give us Uganda in Africa. Let's go there for a while, save the Jews from the pogroms in Russia, and then we move to Eretz Israel. We'll never give up Eretz Israel, but people are suffering. You know who was for his idea and who was against? You would never believe it. The secular Zionists from Russia were against it. They felt that if they lose, the idea of Zion, of Eretz Israel, of Palestine, you know who was for it? The religious side, the rabbis that walked hand in hand with Herzl. There were very few. So most of the Orthodox world didn't like Herzl from A to Z. But those who were walking with Herzl said, why not? Because we have Messianism still, let's go to Uganda. They called it a night asylum, like asylum, like a haven. A night haven. Let's take the Jews from Russia and Poland to Uganda, give them mangoes, it will be nice there for 10, 50 years, things will relax, and then we move to Eretz Israel. Why not? The religious Zionists then said, why not? We were waiting for the Messiah to take us to Jerusalem, we can wait another 50 years. Isn't that striking?
That is.
They couldn't, it was okay for them. Okay? So to your question, back to your question, I think that Chabadniks, which are the right-wingers, it's not a good, but they would say, yes, we're Zionists, we're pro, but they're not for the Zionist project as a secular move. This is not their take. Okay? I'm not sure if they will sing a tikva no. They would. No, they will respect it. They will respect it. They will know.
But Chabad is different from
Yes, of course.
other kinds
When
of
we say ultra-Orthodox, it's a whole span. From anti-Zionism to okay to indifference to okay. There is a whole. They won't leave.
Where's Nahama when we need her? She could tell us.
But okay, he can tell you as well. It's complex as well. Okay. So, but at least what we've seen here is that this is, first of all, they rely on Jewish soul. What he wants to push is for Jews as the carrier of Jewish history, not God, not the Messiah, us. It's we who do it. Okay? But still, there is a great yearning and connection to the past. Zion is a past place for all of them. It's coming from the past. Okay? Jerusalem, Eretz Israel. So now my question is, hey, kibbutzniks, how could you have sung these both songs together? This is what happened. I'm telling you, I was there, but you can watch it on YouTube. Isn't it amazing? The international labor movement anthem. Yesterday, nothing. Let's give the past. Let's break the past completely. Break from the past. Hatikva is all connected to this sense of looking back and inspiring to the future. Still, of course, it's human. It's not godly, but it's all full. Hatikva, but not alpine. 2,000 years. This whole poem is about tradition and past. It resonates with Ezekiel. It's all there. So how could they stand in the kibbutz that you're, in the show, the exhibition that you show downstairs that you are leading people through? How could they have done that? Wave the two flags together. What do you say? What do you think? How does it look to you?
Well, it is a new society. You form a new image. Or you try to make a new society. You bring in, but you do bring something. You bring, or else why would they come to Israel? That's the bottom line. That's Eretz Avotenu.
That's still going back to the past.
You have to. But here they want a new society.
So let me now tell you some beautiful metaphor that I think we've both heard from David, and I think we both miss him, as a teacher. As a philosopher, his books are around, but David Hartman was a wonderful teacher. And in his classes, over and over, he used to, when he spoke about the early Zionists, the kibbutzniks, okay, the the revolutionaries, he used to use this metaphor, which I really identify with. He said, okay, they were all adolescents, 17, 18, they were very young. Young people, youngsters, teenagers, okay? Today, barely having a permit to drive. And they moved to another country, and they did crazy things. Today, we would send them to some treatment, therapy. Okay. So he said, they were coming to their parents, and they told them, you're all doomed. You're the old world. Everything that you do, we despise. The way that you walk, the way that you look, your ideal, nothing changed. But this was very radical. This was very radical. Of course, it happens today. Okay, wait, but it's true in a way.
That to you, Barbara?
But that's the contemporary. I mean, we did the contemporary art here. That's the break where everything changed. That's it.
And they were more radical with that also because of economic reasons. People were breaking off. And also, to go to this remote country, war, so hot, and I mean, for me, I'm joking that Zionism ended with air conditioning. When you have air conditioning, it's not Zionism anymore. Can you think of Bet She'an and the Sea of Galilee when there is air conditioning? Without air conditioning, 50 centigrade, it's really hard. We tend to joke on it today, the exaggeration that we took the H2 and combined it with the O in order to do water. Okay, we laugh on it. My generation, on the but it was very, very hard. How many of them left back? Went back. Ben Gurion said that out of 10, one stayed.
Wow.
Ben Gurion. It's not post-Zionists who said that. Ben Gurion. He was one of them. Some of them committed suicide because they couldn't bear the conditions and the being so far away from the parents. Of course, afterwards, and I know it from my own grandmother and grandfather, something else happened, which usually, thank God, doesn't happen to most of adolescents, and that is that all of their parents perished. And they couldn't anymore reconcile with them because they weren't living anymore, thanks to Hitler. That was something that they couldn't overcome. They couldn't overcome because most of youngsters, after the rebellion, they come to terms with their parents. It's part of maturing. But in order to do that, their parents should be there. And their whole generation vanished. Vanished. We all know.
But if we talk about the Aliyah Shniya, that's what we do here in the kibbutz, Shniya or Shlishit, both
second
had
or
about
third, just translate.
The second and third
second
Aliyah.
or say a third. So both had about 34,000 coming in each wave, and about 17,000 left. So you also have to think they didn't have phones or anything. By the time a letter got, they didn't have anything.
Nothing.
They lost all of it.
Nothing.
And just Aliyah as in wave of immigration to Israel.
So
Wait,
let me
what
just
are
end
the
the metaphor of David Hartman regarding Eretz Israel, coming to the land of Israel. So he says, they were rebelling against everything their parents were. He said, you're bourgeois, Jewishly wise, you're outdated, you're religious, you're everything. We break from you. And they slammed the door and stayed in the living room. Why? Because to go to Eretz Israel, into the land of Israel, is to go to the living room of the Jewish people. They just forgot to leave. You see? I think it's a wonderful metaphor. Because they slammed the door on everything that their parents were. But by coming to the land of Israel, they actually did something so Jewish. And some of the parents, by the way, didn't approve of that. For them, for some of the very religious parents, becoming Zionist was terrible. Was completely a misreading of Judaism.
And for secular parents here, when your child becomes ultra-Orthodox, that's the same.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's breaking against whatever values have been instilled.
Sure, but here, on one hand, so I think here we are, Sigal, you touched How could they hold the two banners together? They held it together. It didn't work all the time and this is part of the complexities of utopia. We spoke about it here yesterday. That utopia is everything works fine together, you know. It's a harmonious, like the murals that you have in the exhibition. Everything looks green and lush and beautiful. But ladies, it doesn't really work like that in life. So they had to hold Zionism on one hand, socialism on one hand, and they waved the flag like crazy. It worked, but it had many, many tensions within the dream itself, regardless of the fact that implementing it had a lot of other issues, you know, with doing it. But even in the dream itself, how would you reconcile your national identity with this socialistic dream of all the workers of the world unite? If the workers of the union is what counts, join the revolution. But you're not joining the revolution. You're going to land of Israel. Where are you? Where are you? So there was, on one hand, they felt, I think, very assured that they're doing the right thing and creating a new society, and that the kibbutz is deeply socialist and deeply Jewish. Deeply Jewish. You know, one of their leaders in that move, who was a very influential in the kibbutz movement, was Martin Buber. Martin Buber, the great Jewish philosopher. He had an immense influence on young Jewish people in the 20s and 30s in Europe. And he came and spoke about the fact that the kibbutz is a realization of a new humanity and new Judaism. Had a wonderful, wonderful sentence. He said, I told you yesterday, kibbutz is turning utopia to topia. The utopia is no place, utopia, non-topos, non-place, turning the no place to a place. Why? Because it's taking the utopia, which is an imaginary vision of a perfect place, and turning it into what?
Reality?
Into reality, into a real place that you can go and visit. Dgania, and Harod, kibbutz that and kibbutz in the Negev, in the Galilee, wherever.
How is it Jewish, though? I thought they rejected religion.
It is Jewish, and this
Because
is
you feel Jewish.
not only that. Not only because they
I'm
felt.
Jewish and I'm not religious. Many Jews
First of
are
all,
not
it wasn't
religious.
religious, but it was Jewish because the people who were doing that were Jews, and they felt
Yeah.
Jews. But more than that, but your question is so
Jewish.
important. They felt that they were realizing the prophecies of Isaiah more than any Jew in the world. Isaiah, the prophet, not Isaiah Berlin or Isaiah, I don't know who said, okay? Isaiah chapter 1.
So
Read
they
on Yom
didn't
Kippur.
They didn't reject the past.
No, not fully. And you see that a lot of them, when they speak, Isaiah said in his prophecy, I don't need your sacrifices. I don't need your prayers. You know what I want? I want you to take care of the poor. Take care of the widows, of the orphans. That's what I need, God said. And they said, this is what we do in the kibbutz. We're creating the image of a holy society, but not holy in the sense of it's holy in the eyes of God, but it's the most socially a perfect, or aspire to be a perfect, equal human society. And they felt that this was Jewish, that they were doing tikkun olam, but not in a
world.
mending the world, but not in a fixing it slightly, giving a whole different alternative.
So did they kind of reject all the rules that have been developed over the years, and they kind of went back to the core?
Yes. Yes.
What rules?
And let me tell you something even more.
Rules?
The Jewish halakha,
Oh,
Jewish law.
Jewish
Sure.
law.
But let me tell you, when they sat down And they had to form their regulations, because every society, after all, it's very nice to say, oh, we're friends. But at the end of the day, there are salaries and duties, and let's make love not war. It's a nice slogan, but it's
put in practice.
but it has to be put in practice. It's not enough. Okay, it's not political. I mean political. I don't mean partisan. I mean political as a real project practice. Okay, so when they sat down, Berl Katzenelson, the person that I thought to read, but we won't read today, probably. Oh, maybe yes. He said, when we were writing our bylaws, our, the kibbutz, we were thinking in terms of halakha, of Jewish law. He was using these words. You read in their books, in their diaries. They were, by the way, graphomans. How do you say? They were addicted to writing. They were writing and writing.
Journals and diaries. They all
Diaries
wrote
because they didn't have their parents to talk with, so they wrote. So we have a lot of the chronologies of their interactions. Many of them were using Jewish terms to describe what they're doing. They said we're doing a new halakha, a new Jewish law, because what the rabbis did is exactly that. The temple was destroyed. They were, forging a new way of living. We're doing exactly that. This is what we do. We take our Jewish knowledge and we put it into modern life in Eretz Israel, in the land of Israel.
Too, right?
Sure. And they felt that they were completely Jewish about it. Now, we can't overlook the fact that there were a lot of debates between them how much Jewish they want to be. I mean, some of them said, oh, no. But a lot of them spoke Jewishly, thought Jewishly.
Have some tradition because they came with it from home.
Right,
Not
that's
only
what
that
they
they
had.
came tradition, they wanted to invent tradition. Okay? to reinterpret it in terms that will fit their mindset and their ideologies. This is what you see in the exhibition. Okay? This is what you look at downstairs. Okay? What you also see in maybe I think in the Utopia are sometimes the complexities of doing that. Okay? The prices that you might pay, a person on a wheelchair, so I think one of the main, we call it dreaming together through songs, the glimpse of Israeli soul. There are two songs here. They are both part of the soul of the same person. How can it be that they are together? Well, that's part of the tension. Sometimes this tension was unbearable, and many times it was productive, and it produced a lot of things that we're still nourished by today. The kibbutz endeavored to write new Haggadah shel Pesach, new Pesach Haggadah. There are, I don't know how many, hundreds of versions of people who were sitting in the kibbutzim and writing a new version of Haggadah shel Pesach. There is an institute in kibbutz, Bet HaShita. They collected all of, and now we go now as we are the grandchildren of this generation, grandchildren. It's a wonderful asset that we have. And we see some of the, we could have done a lesson only on the Haggadah shel Pesach.
That's coming, that's next exhibition actually.
Really?
Well, we're exhibiting the Shik Haggadah, but we're also exhibiting alongside it a collection of other Haggadot, including, I think for sure at least one example of a kibbutz Haggadah.
No.
So,
This
I
is
starting January 6th, we'll be training on
But
that.
within the culture here, groups have been writing their
Sure.
own Haggadot to
Nachon.
express,
Their values.
I remember the first women's, you know,
Uh-huh.
Haggadahs from.
Santa Cruz.
Yeah, Santa Cruz.
Sure.
That's the,
Yeah.
And the gay Haggadah and women Haggadah, sure.
The 1 minute Haggadah.
No, I
Oh yeah, my parents did that.
let's eat and that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, but sure, because the story of exile and redemption and leaving Egypt as a metaphor and coming to a new, that's a story which is it's appealing for it still is appealing. Okay, so why should we read the old text? They said no, we can't read the old text. We want to do something new. We want to be the contemporary Jewish museum, but not a
also-
museum.
Modern art.
Society.
A society, contemporary Jewish society.
Well, they
Yes.
also didn't have the time, did they, to sit and study? My impression is they really need to work hard on the land and,
First of all, they with all that they did invest a lot in culture. It's interesting. Some of them were very materialistic and despised culture as a concept. Culture. It's again those Jews. Those Luftgeschäft, the airy Jews, liquidish, But a lot of them really did carry with them a lot of sentiment and respect to culture, and they invested a lot in it. The good news is many of them were educated from,
Before.
they didn't have to go to study the Hebrew University because they did it already while they were young. In their upbringing in yeshivot, some of them, not all of them, some of them. And you see that those that were more educated in Jewish sources, they were the ones who were leading the new Haggadah. And the Haggadah is just one example. It's that it was a full alternative to synagogue life, to all what they considered all Jewish life. It was a full. And it's not only the holidays. Okay, it's very important to emphasize that. For them, the way that they treated the sick, that was a question. Not only how you celebrate Yom Kippur, how do you visit the sick, how do you take care of the elderly. All these questions, they are the moral questions. It's not only how the rituals. Okay? It's the real life questions.
Yes, in a way, the issue that to be social, it doesn't mean that you need, and to destroy the past, it doesn't mean that you need to forget where you come from. Because also all over the world, Russian socialists, they sang the song in Russian, but in Lithuania, they sang it in Lithuanian,
sure.
and they had their poetry and they connected to their culture. So I think that in that way, it's not that the Russian socialists look on the Jews and they said, "Oh, you betray us because you sing it in Hebrew." It was kind of normal because nationalism was super strong in Europe. Right?
It's interesting. But first of all, it was a debate within the communist and socialist
No,
movements.
for sure.
And for Jews, it was a much more relevant option to cut it all and leave it, בכלל, to be completely immersed in the Russian Revolution and to say nothing in Hebrew or Yiddish or anything. Which for the Russian, where would he be immersed into? American? A German? He had his... Now, Ben Gurion said something in 1945, before 1946, when it was clear that the state is there, almost. So he addressed the socialist youngsters. And he said, what's the... People from kibbutz, okay, said, what's our challenge? To say we should break the old world and create a new one. Our tragedy or challenge is that we don't have an old society. We've been deprived of our own society for the last 2,000 years. So in order to reconstruct it, we have to first create it. We have no. In a way, okay, in a way. For him, that was So you're right on one hand. On the other hand, it was expected of Jews. This was part of Lenin's. Jews were expected to live, while others were expected to be part of their national frameworks. And some Jews did live, left it completely. I think that for them, that was an option of how to be socialist and not to be alienated to where they come from. Exactly. And not to be alienated to their upbringing, to their roots. But it required a lot of effort.
But the international and the socialism has this tension within also. And that's part of the breaking of the utopia, because real socialism is no state and no nation and no money and it didn't work. So they found like
a middle
sideway.
Yes, and I think some of them were very much aware of the fact that if they throw it all, they throw it all. They will be left with nothing. I mean, it's and of course other revolutionary regimes, the Soviet regime, very quickly. I mean, you can't throw it all. You play with tradition after all. Even when you're a revolutionary, you can't completely. Exactly the moment that you keep the language. They tried to change the calendar. No. Okay. The French Revolution, one of the first things that they did is to change the names of because time is such an absorbing fabric of our life. But very quickly it came back to January, February, August, right? And for them, but for the pioneers, it was interesting because they weren't living. Here they had to take the Hebrew calendar, establish it as a real life calendar, and do something meaningful with it. And that was the challenge, and that was the. I mean, I hope you see how it does it resonate with what you do here in the. In the exhibition, in the museum at all?
To me it does, because I do it for when I do the panels, I talk about exactly most of the things here. But that's maybe because my background, that's a history, that's what I'm
asking.
As an Israeli, let's say there were no signs saying this is related to Israel. The images.
You mean the
kibbutz show. Just the images, if you were to go in, would they just resonate with what Israel is like? Like, I've never been to Israel. So.
You mean the photos?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They are familiar to me.
Okay.
I mean, even though some of them are from the 50s, I'm not from the 50s.
The 30s. The 30s.
Okay, 30s, 50s, 30s, right?
So some are very
Of course, they are part of our story. They are, we grew up on this, and we also criticized and laughed on this kind of, we came, there was nothing, and all of that, and we had to do it on We laughed. Some of it is true, some of it is over mythology, like in every but it's very much there. It's very much there. And also, and of course, the question of where are kibbutzim heading today, because it is, some of it collapsed. I told there was a group here of students from the community high school, right? The students that were here today.
This morning from the iEngage program.
Yes.
They were from the Jewish Community High School.
Jewish Community High School. So I told them, look, I've been in a kibbutz for about 24 hours. Okay? I was part of a youth movement. I came to a kibbutz. Okay, and it didn't work out. I'm from Tel Aviv, Malasat.
You were thinking of staying?
Yeah, well,
Maybe.
I was working in one of the factories. And I know that it's problematic, and there was a time in Israel that people felt resentment towards kibbutzniks because they were very, we are them and them, we are all of that. And I understand the resentment. But I can tell you, I have a lot of empathy to this project, because after all, it's a human effort to make a better society. And the fact that a lot of it didn't work or last doesn't make me happy as a person, regardless of Jewish, Israeli, or what. The endeavor of people to try to live together, decent, equal life, with some sort of a moral stand of equality, and it's
From gender
From-
perspective, it's amazing.
it's amazing what they did on gender.
Well, many
perspective.
people had a good
But-
life.
Mhm.
Actually, had a good life.
Of
I know,
course.
and I
According to
know
where
many
they came
Uruguayans
from.
who are still
From where
living
they
in the
came from, but it
kibbutz.
didn't work really well, and today also the women
I think it evolved. It seems like from what I hear from the people who still live in those kibbutzim, it evolved into something else, because I know these people who, like the husband is an engineer, in the army, and she works in the kibbutzim as an architect, and
It's
they get
different.
very good salaries, and they travel, and they come here, and they go,
It's-
they have
it's-
a
it
great
changed.
life.
It changed. I can tell you also, I don't cherish people who want to have the kibbutz as a sort of the posters that you have downstairs. It's this romantics. It's good for those who are looking on it from the outside. But if you're living in it, and you see the whole country is much more affluent, is much richer, people travel, they have cars. So, do you want the kibbutzim still dance with cows? No, and to dance on the hay? No, I understand it. I think people wanted to, no, I agree with you. People wanted to
And they have
maintain them.
factories in the kibbutzim,
Sure.
and they...
So it changes, and it's not
It
what it was
evolved.
in the
It has
20s.
evolved.
And in that sense, that's part of natural processes. We can't have them.
Everything has changed
Right.
in our life. You're right.
No,
Which
but
is
I mean,
good.
it's something paradoxical happened here. They were revolutionaries, and some of us want to keep them how they were revolutionaries in the 20s, because it serves some sort of a sentiment that we want to have.
Also,
Yes.
many people, myself included, went and lived on kibbutzim
Sure.
and learned an incredible amount when we were young. And I think it's affected communities and
All over.
peoples all over the world, because, I met Swedes and Danes,
Sure.
and it worked to maybe assuage their guilt or their collective guilt of, that maybe their countries did not do enough. And
Mhm.
so, it wasn't only the effect it had on on Israel, but a much wider
Sure.
influence.
And also the decline was also very painful for many kibbutz. There was one kibbutz in the Negev that only elderly people stayed. And it was like a senior citizen home in the middle of the desert. Now there were no other younger working hands who would sustain. At the end, they somehow made it, and now, by the way, this kibbutz is being revived again. So it's interesting. These places have their own way of life cycles. But in the mid-90s, I remember the article in Haaretz. It was a heartbreaking article about people who were going to this no man's land. It was very nothing there. They built a kibbutz. Now they're about in their 80s, and all the young people left because it wasn't appealing for them anymore, and they just stayed down in the middle of the desert.
They can't leave, they have no assets.
And they couldn't leave.
That's
They
right.
couldn't leave. This is all they've had. And of course, what is true is most of the time, kibbutz life was rather modest. All Israel was rather modest. And now in the mid-90s, they found themselves stuck in the desert, with no pensions, with
No assets.
with no assets, basically, because some kibbutzim the land is but in the Negev nobody cares for it. Wow! So you see, it's like one of the things is that they forgot one thing. They were very young. They forgot that they will become old.
And have children who
But if
wanted
their
to.
children had stayed, they would have been.
Yes,
cared
but
for.
one of the crucial moments in some of the kibbutzim was, and that's also a very interesting moment. Excuse me, Akil, let me go back. Is when in some of the kibbutzim, their parents came before the Holocaust, and their parents were observant. Came.
Yeah.
No, they were. They started the kibbutz in 1930. In 1936, their parents came from Poland. but with the whole thing. Now, they had to literally face the question of their morals, their values, that were conflicting with the fact that they were the new Jews, and now came the old Jews. But the old Jews were their parents. So they started synagogues. In kibbutz. Yes. For the parents.
For the
parents.
And they koshered part of the, and in one of the moshavim in the Jezreel Valley, Kfar Yecheskel, they started the kibbutz, and you go there and say, who went into, yes, they were.
Well, you have that picture downstairs of the men with.
That's a religious.
That's
kibbutz.
a religious
That's
kibbutz.
a religious kibbutz, which is a different phenomenon. Also, by the way, interesting by itself.
Yeah.
People that were religious, orthodox, and started kibbutzim because they also saw the value of combining Torah with socialism. Torah and socialism. Sure, and of course producing the land. But they saw it as, hand in hand. Wonderful people. We knew many of them. They were. I wish the production line is closed already. Of these people, the old religious kibbutzniks. We some of them were teaching at Hartman. You see people. I mean, it's just amazing. The depth, the seriousness, the integrity, the openness of these people, of many of them, is something that you rarely meet.
We just had an article in the J about some of the founders of Kibbutz Kitura. They're back in Berkeley, but it was very interesting, talking about how I was surprised in a way that they left, but maybe their children are living here.
I just want to mention 3 aspects that came to the Israeli society which we need to think. And one, the health insurance. The idea of having health insurance for everyone, things that now we struggle here in America, it's something that in Israel was basic. Secondly, the Israeli army, that men and women serve together, equal, of course, with all the problematic aspect of what does it mean to be equal, but show me any other army
from day one.
From day one.
Yes.
And the third one that still exists in Israel, I don't know if it's in decline, I mean, you know much better because you work in education, it's youth movement.
Youth movement.
And
youth culture.
Youth culture.
I think they're in the scouts still.
No, it's still.
Yeah, it's still the Noah Obed, the Shmutznikim. I just want to mention and to finish that the ultra-Orthodox, where I come from, they had huge respect to the kibbutzim people.
Interesting.
Yes.
Why?
Because they were honest. I mean, they fight against them, but they did it with the whole heart. They were very Jewish. They were really fighting. And
by the way, when Yatir says fighting, it's not in the Knesset. They came to beat each other. Seriously. There were people from the kibbutzim coming to Jerusalem. They came to fight, not to to drive on Shabbat. It was a don't mislook. It was a cultural war that was also sometimes physical war.
With stone and sticks.
Yes,
it's not funny.
It's not funny.
Injury and everything.
Yes, sure.
But they respected each other and they fought.
But there was
the leaders of the ultra-Orthodox
Yes.
deeply respect the kibbutz people.
I want to go back for a moment to this universal Medicare. That came from kibbutz culture and influenced all Israel. And when my parents